Owl City's song Fireflies would have a far more sinister meaning if he lived in the world of the Wild Imaginary West. Unfortunately for these guys, they do live in the Wild Imaginary West, and they're about to find out exactly how it would feel to get hugs from 10,000 lightning bugs. I got right to work removing the men from their runners and gluing them together using plastic cement from Tamiya. Assembled all 3 of the remaining guys from the box that I just obliterated. The other 2 guys who came in the box were also used in Wild Imaginary West projects, so I would consider that a box well used. As always, these MB figures went together like a dream and have excellent detail, always looking for an excuse to buy and use their stuff. After the guy in the military uniform, I moved on to the other 2 who, let's just say, look a little less professional. And speaking of the guy in the uniform, I was trying to put my finger on where I had seen that face before, and it finally came to me. The concept for this diorama is to have these 3 guys standing on the ground surrounded by a swarm of lightning bugs. To make the base, I cut up a slice of a PVC pipe, and I cut up another slice of a PVC pipe, which I sliced in half, which will be the back of the diorama. I grabbed a nice thick piece of styrene, and for the life of me, I can't remember where this offcut came from. If you guys know or remember, let me know in the comments. Next, I used some Weld-On 3 to get the PVC and styrene fused together. This solvent cement is thinner than water and uses capillary action to get into all the cracks and crevices, bonding plastic in seconds. It'll also instantly strip and ruin your hobby mat if you're not careful. But I wouldn't know anything about that because I haven't ruined multiple hobby mats doing that in the past. After trimming off the excess styrene, I used more Weld-On 3 to attach the back of the diorama at the top. The next step was to drill some holes through that rounded back, and I started with a manual tool and then switched to an automatic one that my dad just bought me, which saved me a ton of time. In case you were wondering, each of these holes represents a firefly. But we'll see that later. I decided I didn't want to just have a blank background and then a foreground, but I wanted something else in the middle. Maybe there's a name for that. In this case, it's a tree made partially from epoxy putty and partially from branches that I pruned from some wargaming trees. After the branches were in position, I blended them into the trunk using some sculpting styluses. Or is it stylusi? Either way, I gave the trunk some realistic tree texture. Actually, I'm not sure how realistic it is, but it matches the texture on the branches, so I'm happy about that. I then sanded the flat area at the bottom to give it some tooth. That way it will actually hold on to this mud texture paste from AK, which I spread all around with a palette knife. While the mud was still wet, I applied some silicone to this 1/35 scale boot stick that I made, and I pressed it into the mud to make some footprints. Probably more exaggerated than they needed to be, but at least they will be visible. The steps I just completed require some cure or dry time, so I set that aside for a few hours and I got my minis ready for painting. And off camera I added a forestall, which I suppose could be used to tune in to listen to the radio, or listen to Fireflies. Also, my apologies for the recurring Owl City bit. It cost me like $50 to be able to use that song, so I want to get my money's worth. After a couple hours, I came back and threw on some grass tufts, as well as made some channels for the wires, which will help the facade sit more flush when I add that later on. After that, it was time to paint. I broke out the airbrush and primed the landscape with a black acrylic primer from Vallejo, and I primed the characters with a dark rusty red. After everything was primed, I began working on the backdrop, which I wanted to be a dusky sky with a glimmer of sunset just barely on the horizon. It ended up being a much larger glimmer than I had planned, so I went back and darkened everything. There's still a little bit of light, just a lot more subtle. The next step was to break out the wet palette and get painting the details, starting with the tree bark. I threw my paints down on the palette and then began painting it how I assumed a tree would look after dusk in the light. I'm not sure where the light's coming from. The lighting on this whole diorama is kind of a mess, but I didn't want to commit to fully realistic lighting on this one, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to see any of the people. After painting up the rifle and the grass tufts with a little bit of dry grass color, The base itself was done, and I was really happy with the way that looked. And it was time to move on to the characters. And while I paint these, I'll give them a little bit of a backstory. The Wild West provides a lot of opportunity for people with military or gunslinging skills, much more so than the East has to offer. These three friends decided to move out and become hired guns, or mercenaries, which is a very lucrative business. The men were on their way from Fort Smith to Atoka. They got lost after getting caught in a thunderstorm. Bad news for them was that their forestall took some damage in the rain. It wasn't completely ruined, but having malfunctions of any kind on your forestall in the Wild West is a very precarious situation. The men knew the general direction they were headed. They figured eventually they'd run into the path or into another town where they could regroup and get back on course. Unfortunately, nightfall came without running into anything promising, so the three men hunkered down near an old dead tree and they prepared to get a fire going. And that's when an ominous and unsettling sound filled the air around them. Just as the last evidence of the sun was dipping beyond the horizon, another light source began to shine, in accompaniment with a low humming and crackling sound. Pulsing slowly on and off all around was the glow of a swarm of lightning bugs. While similar to their docile eastern counterparts, these glowing insects pack a punch. One shock on its own will likely not be fatal, but a frenzy of tiny lightning bolts would be hard to survive. The men loaded scatter shot and other specialized ammunition into their weapons, and they got ready for the worst. At the very least, this is going to be a long night. After the characters had been painted, it was time to install the lights. I used some nano LEDs, which I ran through the back and seated all the wires in this vascular-looking system. Once that was done, I bunched up all the negatives and the positives, and I soldered them together to an electric tea light candle, which I glued underneath the base. The next step was to go in and paint on some fireflies. You thought for a second I wasn't going to play it. With the painting and the lighting done, it was time to clean up the sides with some wooden veneer. Wrapped that in a tube, trimmed it down to size, peeled off the backing, and put it in place. And then to get it to match the sides of the diorama, trimmed it down very, very delicately using a hobby blade. I didn't have much visibility, so I made sure my first pass had lots of good clearance, and then on my second pass, I got as close as possible. Once the veneer had been stuck in place, I painted it black using the airbrush. I considered staining it, but figured that for this diorama, black would look better. The last thing to do was to glue the men in place. And after that, I called it good. Got some exciting news for the Wild Imaginary West. I just opened up the first box of Wild Imaginary West RPG full boxed sets, which were shipped to me, and I have to paint all of these sets. They're for the Kickstarter backers who purchased a fully painted set. The rest of the boxes should be preparing to be shipped out to everybody else very soon. It's been a long time coming, and I just want to thank all of you guys for your patience, and once again, a huge thank you to everybody who supported that Kickstarter. I cannot wait for it to be in your hands and hear what you think. Otherwise, that is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out, as always, to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.